ban TikTok. How the Trump administration could ban it in the United States. The apparent cold conflict between China and the United States continues, and this time the apple of contention is the Chinese TikTok app. Welcome to Finance Stock. What is happening with the emerging giant social network TikTok? We show you the latest events that are affecting the social network and the possible scenarios that would cause a sudden ban on its use in the United States. Evidently, the Trump administration is considering the ban on Chinese social media apps, including the preferred TikTok video clip app. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo mentioned the possibility Tuesday, saying it was something we're seeing in a Fox Information interview with Laura Ingraham. Pompeo offered few details, and the comment may have been easily eventual. But he also compared TikTok to Huawei and ZTE, two businesses that have actually suffered very real effects after drawing the wrath of the United States government. With increasing tension between the US and China, Trump trying to outlaw TikTok is not out of the question, and while he is not as straightforward as Pompeo and also Ingraham make him appear, it could still cause trouble for the company and your clients. As we recall, India banned TikTok as part of a radical shutdown of Chinese apps in the country. The ban comes after a border clash that left at least 20 Indian soldiers dead. The Ministry of Information Technology has received many complaints from various sources, including various reports of the misuse of some mobile applications available on Android and OS platforms to steal and surreptitiously transmit user data to servers that they have locations outside of India. The Indian government said in a statement. Furthermore, TikTok will leave Hong Kong in days due to new laws enacted by the Communist Party in China. In light of recent events, we have decided to halt operations of the TikTok app in Hong Kong, a TikTok spokesperson told Reuters. TikTok has previously stated that it would not comply with any request made by the Chinese government to censor the content or access to TikTok user data. These conditions give the impression that the Chinese government wants to handle TikTok for mass procurement of data. On the contrary, Australia may not ban the popular TikTok app despite concerns that it has been infiltrated by the Chinese Communist government, according to a leading technology expert. Technology commentator Trevor Long said any TikTok ban would be a slippery slope toward a great tension between Beijing, China, and Canberra, Australia, that no one will accept here. The most intense application restrictions occur in the network degree, obstructing any type of communication between the selected web servers and also the users in the country. That's the strategy adopted by China's Great Firewall program, and it's exactly how India enforces its recently implemented TikTok ban. Australia, which is considering a similar constraint, would probably take the exact same method. However, American law does not have any kind of precedent to obstruct software in that regard, so it doesn't seem likely that the White House will certainly have the capacity to go through with that kind of strict network censorship. TikTok does not have the same vulnerabilities as Huawei or ZTE. Pompeo contrasted management's TikTok intention to crack down on Huawei and against ZTE, including securing them from federal government contracts. Admittedly, TikTok has been banned from many public servants' working phones, including members of the U.S. military, and some lawmakers are also pushing for a more comprehensive restriction as well. However, Huawei and ZTE sold components to telecommunication conductors who, in turn, collaborated with government companies. TikTok is a consumer application, so a penalty would be much less extensive. While Huawei and ZTE are used by companies, says Sam Sachs, a member of the Paul Tsai China Center at Yale Law School, TikTok is used by many people in the United States. A more likely target is the United States Foreign Investment Committee, CFI-US, which manages mergers and also financial investments involving non-US businesses. CFI-US opened a national security investigation at TikTok last year, noting similar concerns to Pompeo, and there is sufficient evidence against the business to build a plausible instance. TikTok is a subsidiary of the Beijing-based ByteDance company, and its critics have raised numerous concerns about its total personal privacy methods, as well as its possible ties to the Chinese government. The patterns of leaked small amounts inhibited objection from occasions such as the Tiananmen Square objections. Although TikTok says it stores individual U.S. information in the United States, there is a constant concern that it may transmit information to Chinese state-owned companies. TikTok has repeatedly denied that it shares information in this way, and claims that small quantity standards are no longer used. The Chinese government is experienced in gaining control over nodes in the information system, Sarah, an expert on the subject, told The Verge in an interview in 2019. If CFI-US chooses that Chinese ownership is an issue, the council could create great difficulty for TikTok. In recent years, CFI-US has denied some high-level merger and buyout strategies, consisting of the purchase by a Chinese company of the gay connection app Grindr, which it rejected at national security facilities. The council could make TikTok restructure itself in a way that further separates its American existence from China, or maybe even make ByteDance sell Musical.ly, the American app it got to help seal its visibility in the United States. However, it is not specifically a restriction yet, and it is not generalized at all to all Chinese social media applications at all. Even if the government is unable to restrict TikTok, IT may try to delete it. To get TikTok out of Americans' phones, the federal government would have to do something like make Apple and Google cut their connections to ByteDance, in addition to any other Chinese app maker. Removal from the iOS App Store and Google Play Store would greatly reduce the appeal of TikTok, even if it can still be accessed through a side download app or a website. Apple, specifically, maintains strict control over iOS devices. His App Store plan is so limiting that it generated antitrust lawsuits. Basically, the federal government would be causing companies to remove the TikTok platform, and also uninstalling can be exceptionally powerful. To do this, Trump's management could repeat a method it used with Huawei, getting the business department to put TikTok on the list of entities that limits its industrial ties to business in the United States. The administration does not require the approval of Congress to do this, and may also cite any United States business that works with them, with a few exceptions, for failing to comply. The entity list has actually stopped Google from collaborating with Huawei on Android phones, and also if TikTok were successfully included in the list, Apple and Google would certainly have a hard time keeping them on the App Store. James Lewis, director of the technology plan at the Center for Strategic and International Research, says putting the TikTok on the list would be extreme, unusual and legally uncertain. They can authorize them, but generally the sanction is linked to commercial offenses or espionage or the spread or theft of intellectual property. You can't just do it since it affects a business, says Lewis. Unlike TikTok, Huawei faces real criminal charges from the United States for theft of scams and trade secrets. The TikTok cases remain suspicions, illegal complaints. Furthermore, an unrelated lawsuit for unjustifiably collecting children's data was resolved virtually quickly. Trump is frequently not overly interested in knowing if his orders are authorized. If you provide an executive order professing to ban the TikTok or other Chinese apps, you may be immediately questioned in court, but it will certainly create unpredictability and reputational damage. Currently, the White House is trying to warn investors not to approach Chinese companies, as even periodic App Store issues would slow down its customers' development and affect marketing profits. And also many users would not understand that Trump cannot legally close TikTok, so they could abandon him before something happens. Neither of these options would certainly comprise a literal TikTok ban, that is, a block that reduces customers in the United States outside of the TikTok network. Like head of state Trump's risks of shutting down Facebook and Twitter, Pompeo's discussion of the TikTok ban obscures the actual limits of the U.S. government's power. However, it may herald truly unpleasant attempts to limit how Americans can use the internet.